Hey guys, Neville here. I'm just out at the archery range this morning shooting some arrows. We're kind of in that midsummer time frame. Hopefully your bow is fully set up. You got all your pins sighted in. And for me, this is the time of the year where I like to solely focus on shooting animal targets like this paper face you see behind me or 3D. And I'm really practicing real life scenarios that I'll face out in the field. The first thing I like to practice is setting up my shot and how I'm gonna stop the animal. So what I mean setting up your shot, it's all those little details that you do before that animal is in range to be best prepared for that opportunity. You know, whether that's having your arrow knocked, where your release is gonna be, how you're gonna be range finding, where you're gonna put your range finder, where you're gonna put your release, are you gonna have it attached to your string? You know, practicing this process of setting up my shot before that animal comes in and what that's gonna look like. So for me, what I usually do is I have my arrow already knocked on my string. I have my release in hand and I'm getting range marks. So my sole goal is trying to find all the different ranges that this animal is most likely gonna walk in. I have my shooting lanes and I'm range finding each of those shooting lanes. Once I do that, it goes back in the pouch or I'll just drop it with my tether. Once I have all my ranges set and all my marks known for all these different shooting lanes, I connect my release right up to the D-loop. And I'm sitting like this and I'm waiting for those animals to come in to my shooting lanes and I'm ready to go. Next, I like to practice stopping the animal and what my process is gonna look like. Everybody's a little bit different. For me, you know, I like to come to full draw. I'm not even into my shooting position, not anchored or anything. I'm off the string. I'm looking at the animal. I'm waiting for that animal to come into the shooting lane. Once it comes into the shooting lane, I stop it. Meow, meow. I anchor, click, aim, fire. So that's how I like to stop animals. I shoot a hinge release, so timing is super important for me. That's why I don't even start my shot process until that animal is stopped. So I have consistent timing over and over. But if you don't practice stopping your animal and you get to that situation, you might get anxiety when you make that noise to stop the animal and you're just not gonna be prepared for what exactly you're gonna do. Having that process down, everything that you're gonna do from setting up the shot to stopping the animal is a critical area to always practice and something I like to do every time I come to the range. So the next exercise that I like to practice is being at full draw for an extended amount of time. As many hunters know, this is probably the most common thing that you'll face out in the field. You get to full draw, the animal's behind some brush, you don't have a clear shot, and you have to hold that bow for a long amount of time and then execute a shot. So for me, this is a pretty simple exercise to practice. You know, you get to your target. I still like to do the same process that I mentioned before. I set up my shot, I'm range finding, I come to full draw, and then I just hold. I hold as long as I can until I get super shaky. I stop the animal, I still make that sound, I practice stopping the animal, and then I execute a shot. And really, the most important thing here to practice is trying to execute a shot when you're a little more shaky than normal. That's usually what happens when you're at full draw for an extended amount of time, is there's gonna be a lot more shake in your sight picture. So practicing how you're gonna handle that shake and how you're gonna execute that shot is the most important thing for me when I'm practicing holding an extended amount of time. Number 3 is practicing your in-between yardage. A lot of the times when you're out hunting, those animals aren't exactly at 20 yards. They're not exactly at 30 yards. So first off, what I like to do to get ready for my in-between yardages is I'll go shoot those in-between yardages and understand exactly what my arrow drop is for each of those yardage. Once you know that, then it comes down to how you're gonna hold. For me, I like to pin gap on my in-between yardages, so I know when the animal's at 45 yards, if I put my 40-yard pin right here on the top of this animal and I put my 50-yard pin right there on the bottom of the animal, my arrow is gonna go right in the middle. I know this because I've practiced this. I've shot this shot 1,000 times, so I know exactly what my hold is, what my pin gap is for these different in-between yardages, so I feel extremely prepared and confident when that animal comes in at 37 yards. I know exactly what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna hold high, I'm gonna hold low, I'm gonna pin gap, whatever it may be. Something that you need to do and make sure that you know is how you're gonna hold, what your pin gaps are, and your arrow drop for those in-between yardages. Tip number 4 is practice shooting different angles. So practice shooting quartering away shots, practice shooting quartering 2 shots, practice those broadside shots. A lot of times, those animals aren't gonna come in exactly broadside. They're gonna be a little quartered away, a little quartered 2, but you need to know where you're gonna place that arrow. That's the most important part in this exercise and in this drill is arrow placement. Where does that arrow need to go on a quartering away shot? Where are you gonna aim? Where are you gonna put it? Where does that arrow need to go on a quartering 2 shot? So practicing that and understanding the different arrow placement for each of the angles that you possibly could shoot an animal at is something that I like to practice all the time. The last thing is to practice shooting in different positions. So throughout my hunting career, I've come across a lot of different shooting positions, and these are kind of the most common ones that I have found and that I practice most when I'm at the range. First being uneven ground. A lot of the times you're not on exactly flat ground. So practice shooting on uneven ground, on a slope of a hill, and just kind of understanding what that feels like, because it does feel different when you're aiming and when you're shooting. So make sure you practice on uneven ground. The next shooting position that I like to practice is shooting for my knees or crouching down. I've had this happen to me. I'll probably roll some footage. I had an elk come in, I needed to get just a little bit lower angle to get by some brush. So I had to crouch down like this. And that's going to feel a lot different than when you're shooting upright. So practicing that, understanding what that feels like and how to execute a shot under that pressure and strain of your body. And it's pretty common out in the field that you kind of have to maneuver your body a little bit lower to get a clear shot. The next shooting position is when I'm at full draw, moving back or forward. So there's a lot of the times you're just trying to get that perfect angle where you can have a clear shot at their vitals. And sometimes that means taking a step forward to get that clear view of the vitals, or taking a step back to get that clear view of the vitals. So understanding when you're at full draw that you can move forward or backwards. I've learned that the hard way. I found myself just planted in the ground at full draw, and I realized after, when I didn't get that shot off, that if I would have moved a step forward, I would have had a perfectly clear shot at that animal. Or if I would have moved a step backward, I would have had a good shot at that animal. So knowing that you can move forward and backward is important, and that's something that you need to practice, because you do hold your bow a little bit longer, and you need to practice that motion and getting on the animal and executing a shot. The last shooting position I like to practice is shooting upward angles and downward angles. Here, what I'm really focusing on is the proper form that I need to do to shoot these different angles. You know, I'm bending at my hips and I'm executing a good shot. It's also a good time to see if your third axis is properly set. So a lot of the times you can set your third axis at home, but until you go shoot these different angles, you're really gonna know and see if it is actually set properly. So it's important to shoot upward angles and downward angles to, one, practice what that feels like and understand what you need to do, you know, bending at the hips and executing a good shot, and to see and check if your third axis is properly on and you're not missing right or left. Those are my top 5 drills and exercises for real life hunting scenarios. You never want to find yourself on a hunt making a shot for the first time because you've never practiced it. I think that's the most important thing to take away from this video, is that you can be more prepared for these hunting scenarios, which is going to lead to better shooting and more successful hunts.